Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Human-Centered Leadership session. My name is Sesil Pir. I'm a tenured industrial and organizational psychologist, and I have devoted my life's mission to helping individuals and organizations discover and unleash their potential. In the next 25 minutes, I'm going to share with you a new leadership model. It's inclusive of new behaviors, mindsets, and attributes that are required for the future of work. And it's based on a research study we have conducted together with Stanford University's Center for Compassion, Altruism Research and Education. But first, a little bit about me and our mission as a community. In addition to being an industrial and organizational psychologist, I hold a master's degree, an MBA from Harvard University, a master's in human resources and industrial relations from University of Minnesota, and I have been a practitioner now for about 23 years in the field of human resources. Currently, I am the head of employee experience for Takeda Pharmaceuticals. More recently, I have founded a boutique organizational development company, and we are funding cutting-edge research that's focused on the future of work, that's sort of challenging the status quo of work. This has earned me a number of awards and some seats on the research boards of global organizations. I'm quite proud. And more recently, again, I've become an author, actually. So I continue to write on Forbes on the topics of future of work if you choose to follow me. On the personal front, I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey. I have lived and worked now in the US, in Singapore, in France, and right now actually in Switzerland. I'm based in Zurich. I'm married to a software engineer. I'm very much drawn to arts, technology, science, and nature. But the most important thing I want you to know about me is I come from a family of Sufis. And I deeply value authenticity, compassion, and I consider myself a lifelong learner. And I'm here today because our function, HR, is at an interesting crossroads. In fact, the business is at an interesting crossroads, and perhaps the world we live in is at an interesting crossroads also. All of these definitions we held close as a society, from philosophical to psychological, they're all evolving. We are questioning, for example, what it means to be human again, where and how to comply with human rights, and what to do if they get violated in front of our eyes. What makes up a family is another example. In the past, it was a man and a woman and a child. Now we have a lot more diversity, which we love. What makes up a nation? Who decides someone's right to global mobility? What's our relationship to the environment? Who is responsible for the climate change or the situation we find ourselves in with COVID-19? This is also the same at work. We are questioning a lot of the definitions we have held close in the work experience. So starting with, how do we define work, right? In the old days, it used to be an activity we get paid for. Nowadays, it's more of a passion. Again, in the old days, we used to think of work as some place we go and we do our work and leave. So there was a clean line between work and life. And nowadays, it's a lot more integrated. People can work from anywhere, anytime as they wish. How we organize, delegate, and manage work is also evolving, as well as our workforce. We're again questioning what sort of experience should we provide for our employees. But perhaps most importantly, the question that we live with every day: who is or who should be a leader? What should be the legacy or footmark of a leader going forward? And this is really what I want to discuss today. So let's dive in. I wanted to start with context setting, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, but when we kind of step back at the moment and take a look at our work experience at large, it feels really heavy, quite complex and cumbersome. Our hierarchies, I would say, especially in the global setting, are multidimensional. Our processes are multifaceted. Our practices are very well defined. There's almost a blueprint for everything we do in business. And it's not just within the organization. Our manufacturing lines also go from, let's say, New York to Manila. So we are very large and very expensive. And I want us to remember that we didn't always live and work like this. We started quite small. This doesn't mean we didn't do anything previously. I think human beings have always been productive. But the way we used to manage our lives and manage the work that was presented to us was quite different. This is also the same for production. There was an evolution of production. Again, a lot of learned behaviors there. So in a really brief manner, in the 70s, the main focus of business was on products. And this was quite understandable because people just didn't have enough. I don't know you, but I grew up, for example, inside a house. We didn't have a telephone or a TV. We would actually go to the neighbors in the evening to watch the shows. So limited industrial supply meant producing goods almost always guaranteed you sales. Now, fast forward 20 years, in the 90s already, the market was already getting a bit saturated and companies started looking for market segmentation and differentiation. Again, an evolution there. Then came the customer era. This is when they were selling the first time cell phones to us. Well, they were quite bigger then. And then the services to go along for 2 and 3 years. Today, it's all about relationships. So this era has been evolving and it has been bringing a lot of implications to the workplace. So when we look at data today, for example, what's happened in the last 50 or 20 years, we see really interesting things. The average life cycle of an organization, for example, have dropped from 75 years in 1955 to 15 years in 1975. And today we are churning around 10 to 12 years. We have no idea what that number will be in 2030. Another very interesting data. 52% of Fortune 500 companies have disappeared, completely disappeared, since the year 2000. So nobody is prone to the changes. These forces of globalization, digitalization, and democratization of the workforce is truly taking all of the businesses by ear. And all of the industries, all of the organizations are on an evolutionary journey, if you will. And there are implications that come with this. Our work experience is being redefined, and it's actually being redefined in a kind of a big way, if you will. We are really thinking about the kind of work and the workplace. We are thinking about how we structure our organizations, how we govern. Again, we are rethinking leadership, but we are also redesigning our workplaces, workspaces. This is also why we are referring to the current era as Fourth Industrial Revolution. Now, I think one thing is fair for me to say, no matter where you go around the world, whether it's a startup, whether it's a mid-sized company or a global company, Fortune 500, everyone is looking for something different. We are all seeking for definitely better integration because the current setup of business and the organizations really don't honor the way we live our lives anymore. We're looking for new structures, more flexibility, different ways of governance being led, and we're definitely looking for more human experience. It's this recognition actually that has sort of influenced our thinking and helped us notice the old-fashioned ways of leading the work, managing the work, leading people. This is becoming very irrelevant very fast. And we wanted to find out what could be different. Potentially what could be a different reality for our people, for our organizations. We wanted to also take a positive outlook because there are a lot of research out there around looking at the challenges and the implications and what breaks things. We were interested in understanding what could help us thrive. So we did something I would actually consider quite crazy. We approached the remaining 48% of the Fortune 500 companies who have stayed in the game since the year 2000, and we asked them if they would allow us to study their behavior so we could understand what has led to their sustainable growth. We thought maybe there's something they do that we can learn from, that we try to replicate across other organizations. And sure we did. The very first thing we learned is that their sustainable growth is dependent on two legs. One is adaptability, which refers to an organization's capability to adjust, evolve their processes, their systems, their practices. And the second one is resilience, which refers to an organization's capacity to expand, to learn new mindsets, new behaviors, to bounce back from adversity. We also recognized very quickly that these organizations did significantly better in their engagement survey results than their peers. What you're seeing on the top of this slide is exactly that. They were reporting, for example, 40% less burnout, 106% more energy, 74% less stress. Those are great results. And you know why? Why they were getting these results is because they were actually offering holistic human experiences to their people. They cared not only about people's mental capacity and challenging them with the kind of work, they cared equally about people's spirituality, their emotional and their physical well-being. And of course, when individuals thrive, they become more interested in the success of others, in driving collective action, and naturally, organizations thrive in return. But we weren't quite satisfied with these findings. We wanted to also see if we could find any common threads of behaviors that could help us rethink the way we understand leadership. And sure enough, we found 5 behaviors. Let me try to offer 2 examples from the list here. The first one is, inside these organizations, we learned leaders sit in many chairs. Meaning, despite the title, the tenure, the compensation package someone holds, leadership is not dedicated to a few at the top, but it's a shared responsibility across all levels inside the organization. So when these organizations hired new people, for example, out of college, they still gave them a good place, a good purpose, autonomy to do their work, to get creative. They also empowered them to make decisions within their jobs. They were really treated as equals inside the organization. Another example would be leaders lead for connection, and this surprised us. Inside these organizations, leaders were really mindful about not only staying connected to who they were as individuals, but also providing the space for others to be whole. They were also constantly thinking, how can I connect this person to that person? So they had this network outlook, trying to influence people in a positive way and set them up for success, give them visibility. They were also trying to connect their teams with the external people, external companies, stakeholders, providers, etc. So they were taking this ecosystem view, but connection as a concept was top of mind for them. Now you may think, well, that's easy. We could just adjust our leadership behaviors inside our company and try to embrace these as well. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. I wish it was that easy. Behavior change is heavily influenced by mindsets, and that takes conscious awareness and practice to shift what you do and how you show up inside an environment. In fact, inside these organizations we studied, we discovered people hold a number of new, I would say, mindsets, differentiated mindsets perhaps, to what's typically predominant inside our workplaces. Again, let me give you 2 examples. The first one I want to share is around caring over control. We found in studying these organizations one emotion in the micro moments of experience. It's one sense of caring. This is the degree of affection or compassion people feel and express towards one another. And it can come in the form of eye contact, a smile, or just simply by being present. When people experience this, we measured the brain neurotransmitters they had were actually more positive. They felt more expanded in their well-being, and as a result, they experienced better emotional connection. The contrary to this would be control mindset, which I think is something we are more familiar with. Control mindset presents a perceived regulation inside an environment. In this sort of mindset, people become very wary of what's happening around them, almost to the degree that they may feel fearful. What I do, how is that presented? How is it perceived? They're always paying attention to what others are doing and sort of adjusting their style a little bit. And this can also present itself as resistance to change. And obviously there are implications here because it shrinks our capacity and it cuts the connection we have to our emotional capacity, and therefore we start sort of getting the space unintentionally between people. Another example I want to give is around abundance versus scarcity. Let me start from the opposite side this time. So scarcity mindset would be focusing on what's lacking in the environment all the time. So this could be money, for example. If you're in company of friends, you may be looking at someone's house and thinking, I don't have that kind of house, or maybe looking at their car and thinking, that's kind of cool, I don't have that. It could be love. You may be home, maybe you have siblings, and you may be wondering which one of us are loved a little bit more than others, perhaps. Or it could be resources inside of an organization. You may be looking at your peer and thinking, well, they have more resources in their teams than ours. And this, again, does something for our well-being, for our physical and emotional capacity. We once again shrink. We sort of become a little bit wary of what could go wrong in the environment. And it puts us in this sort of negative space, if you will. And from there, our interactions get also impacted. The opposite to this is abundance mindset. Abundance mindset actually focuses on exactly the opposite, on what's available in the environment. And so in this sort of state, we once again expand in our capacity, and we feel not only more naturally resourceful, but also naturally more creative. Of course, we weren't quite satisfied with all these findings, so we wanted to understand, is there more? Is there more that we could take away from these organizations? And sure enough, we discovered 8 what we refer to as core human attributes that were sort of in play for the development of the behaviors that you saw and in partnership with the mindsets that I just shared. Now, starting from purpose, there are 8 of these: purpose, courage, foresight, emotional insight, wonder, wisdom, compassion, and mastery. I really want you to realize that these attributes are available to all of us, despite where we are born, despite the circumstances we are born in, despite the education that we have or the privilege or the status. We literally are, as human beings, are born with these attributes. Now, the interesting thing is these attributes all sit on a spectrum. Think of it as they each have a light and a shadow side. And we actually have power to choose where we play. With that power comes, and here's the golden information of the day, our impact to the broader climate generation. Let me try to actually demonstrate to you what that could look like. Let's talk about purpose as an example. If we are connected to our life mission, and if we feel like we can bring that to the workplace, we can actually realize that within the work that we do, we wake up with that sort of energy, we come to work with that sort of energy. With that, we are able to take in more information that's available to us inside the environment, and we become more able to tell this story, to create meaning and help people make sense of what's happening in their environment. This actually inspires them. So the output of it is really meaning finding and inspiration. On the flip side, when we are not connected to purpose, or we are not able to bring our purpose to work, our energy transpires differently, and we are not able to take in as much of the information that's available to us in the environment. We are not able to perhaps tell a story, and we contribute to formation of lacking in the broader environment. Now, this is true for all of the attributes. If I were to just go back here, courage, for example, the second attribute, when we gravitate towards courage and when we actually live it, we contribute to formation of psychological safety in the environment, versus when we pull away from it, we contribute to formation of insecurity in the broader environment. So these are really powerful tools. But I want you to look at this slide, especially, and consider how many of our organizations are seeking psychological safety, agility, or innovation is another good one here, but perhaps from outside in. Perhaps we have never really considered if there's anything we can do at an individual level, perhaps with our leadership team, to be able to activate these things that we are seeking for. So think of courage, for example. Brené Brown, she has been here many times with the Workhuman conference. We are all a fan. We follow her work. Emotional insight is another one. Susan David, someone that we love, we follow her work. These people are everywhere, telling their story and sharing their science and knowledge, because all evidence shows us when we learn how to work with these attributes, our power is amplified. We show up differently inside environments, we relate to each other differently, and we really have power over how our cultures evolve. Now, I wasn't born yesterday. I know how we often seek change from outside. So a lot of the times we turn to external interventions to make our culture evolution a stay. But I also happen to know that we hire the BCGs and McKinseys and the Mercers of the world, nothing against them. But really, do they make the change necessary for us to evolve our culture? Perhaps not. So this is perhaps a humble invitation for us to really embrace these values, these basic understandings, the ancient understandings that have been available to us for many, many centuries and have allowed both individual but also collective evolutions throughout humanity. We have an amazing quality that's available to only a few living beings. It's called connection. We are incredibly talented and capable individuals, and we can drive collective action. So perhaps the change starts with us. Perhaps if we claim to be the leaders we are, we must turn and understand how we can behave differently, which mindsets we can really choose to play in, and how do we really connect to our core to become our whole human selves forward. Perhaps this is just another way to drive the change, to become different role models inside our workplaces. Now, if you're unsure where to begin, here's a simple one-pager you can investigate that will guide you through how you show up, how you relate to others, and perhaps how you work with others as human beings and everyday leaders inside your organizations. And finally, I want you to really remember that this is a unique time for business. And with unique times comes the opportunity of reimagination. Our current business taxonomy is not large enough to hold our realities. To evolve our work experience and our ways of working, we must understand the basic concepts that are available to being human and honor our humanities at large. People are still at the heart of all businesses. Even for those that are getting automation in place, our organizations are by far and fundamentally living human systems. And as soulful beings, we each have a need to be seen, to be heard, to be cared for, and to be recognized for our unique contribution. As history would demand, of course, in that evolutionary journey, it becomes necessary for us to dissolve existing patterns, unlearn certain behaviors, and give us a chance to rewire, to build perhaps a more beautiful net and together. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you do visit some of my writing, and I hope you pick up our new book, Human-Centered Leadership, now available on Amazon.